Hey guys, tonight we begin beneath a very wide sky. This is a story of horses, dust, buffalo grass, and warriors who became so comfortable in the saddle that frightened outsiders sometimes described their abilities as if they belonged more to legend than ordinary human beings. There will be battles later, and raids and empires, discovering that maps are considerably easier to draw than borders are to defend. But for now, there is only the quiet country beneath the Rocky Mountains and a people who have not yet become the terror of the southern plains. If you enjoy these long journeys into the stranger corners of history, feel free to subscribe and perhaps leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and allow the room around you to become a little quieter. We are going somewhere much larger, somewhere without walls, and somewhere where the horizon seems to go on forever. Imagine that you wake in the final years of the 17th century. You're not yet a Comanche warrior. In fact, the world does not yet know the Comanche in the way history eventually will. You belong to a Shoshone-speaking people living around the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains, in country that centuries later will be divided into places called Wyoming and Colorado. There are no highways here, no fence posts, no neat lines dividing one ranch from another. There is rock, pine, cold water, and an enormous amount of sky. Morning arrives slowly against the mountains, pale sunlight touches the highest ridges first, while the valleys remain blue with shadow. The air smells of pine resin, old smoke, damp earth, and hides drying near the camp. Your life is mobile because it must be. Food does not politely remain in one place, neither can you. Your people move according to weather, game, water, and season. There are roots to gather, animals to hunt, hides to prepare, tools to repair, and fires to keep alive when the nights become cold enough to make every breath visible. There is little about this existence that suggests an empire is being born. That is important. History often becomes cleaner after it has already happened. We look backward and see the Comanche as if they were always destined to dominate the plains. They were not. Your world is uncertain. A failed hunt matters, an early winter matters, a sick child matters. A damaged bowstring can matter. There are neighboring peoples competing for many of the same resources, and there is no guarantee that your small community will become anything more than one of the many groups moving through the immense interior of North America. Then something begins to arrive from the south. At first, perhaps you hear stories, strange animals, large animals, animals that carry men. The creatures have spread northward from Spanish settlements, passing from one indigenous nation to another through trade, capture, escape, and war. They are horses. The Spanish brought their ancestors across an ocean generations earlier. Far to the south, mounted Spaniards already understand the military value of the animal. A horse can carry a soldier farther and faster than his own legs. It can carry equipment. It can pursue enemies. It can transform the distance a man can cross in a day. But on the plains, something different is about to happen. You approach one carefully. It is taller than you expected. Its body gives off heat in the cold air. You can smell sweat, grass, dust, and something almost leathery. Its ears turn toward every sound. Its nostrils widen when you come close. Put your hand against its neck. You feel muscle moving beneath the skin. The animal is nervous, so are you. Neither of you yet understands what the other is about to become. For many peoples who obtain horses, the animal is enormously useful. It can carry possessions, it can make migration easier, it can help move a camp. But among the people who will become known as the Comanche, the relationship deepens with astonishing speed. The horse does not merely join the old way of life. The old way of life begins rearranging itself around the horse. Imagine the difference. Yesterday, distance was measured by your feet. Today, distance changes. A hunting ground that once required exhausting travel can be reached more quickly. A buffalo herd that might have escaped people on foot can now be followed across open country. Heavy possessions become easier to move. And then someone picks up a bow while riding. That is where the world begins to tilt. The bow already belongs to your life. You understand it intimately. You know the tension of the string against your fingers. You know how wood changes with moisture. You know the quiet patience required before releasing an arrow at an animal that has not yet noticed you. Now imagine carrying that knowledge onto the back of a running horse. At first, it is awkward. Your legs tighten too much, your body bounces. Your hands want to hold the animal rather than the bow. But children learn, adults learn, horses learn too. Gradually, riding stops looking like a separate skill. It becomes something closer to walking. Your community begins moving south and east, away from the mountain country and toward the open grasslands. The plains are almost made for horses. Grass stretches toward the horizon in rolling waves. Buffalo herds provide meat, hides, bone, sinew, and countless other necessities. Waterways cut through the country like long threads. And most importantly, there is room to move. On foot, the plains can make a person feel very small. On horseback, they become opportunity. The transformation is remarkably fast. Within roughly a generation, people who had once lived largely as pedestrian hunters become some of the most sophisticated mounted hunters and fighters on the continent. You begin to notice it in the children. A small boy sits on a horse with a casual balance that would make an inexperienced European cavalry recruit deeply uncomfortable. He does not clutch the animal in fear. He leans with it. When the horse turns, his body turns. When it accelerates, he seems to become part of the movement. Older boys race one another across the grass. Dust rises behind them. They practice controlling their mounts while leaving their hands free. That detail will eventually become terrifyingly important. A European cavalryman normally depends heavily on reins, saddle equipment, formal drills, and disciplined formations. The developing Comanche style is different. The rider wants his hands. His hands belong to the bow, so the horse must learn pressure from the knees and shifts in body weight. A slight movement means turn, another means slow, another means run. Horse and rider begin speaking a language without words. And somewhere on those plains, perhaps during a hunt, perhaps during practice, a rider leans farther to one side than seems sensible. Then farther, his body slips down beside the horse. For a moment, anyone watching might think he is falling. He is not. One leg remains hooked across the animal. The horse continues running. The rider hangs along its side. Almost his entire body has disappeared behind the animal. Then the bow appears beneath the horse's neck. An arrow leaves the string. Consider what this means to someone standing in front of him. You can see the horse, you know a man is riding it. But there is almost no man to aim at. The animal itself has become moving cover. Later, outsiders will stare at this technique with disbelief. Some will write about Comanche horsemanship as though describing an impossible circus performance. But there is nothing supernatural happening. Only practice. Years and years of practice beginning so early that horse and rider no longer seem to perform separate tasks. And this is the first quiet secret behind the reputation that will eventually terrify soldiers from several nations. The Comanche warrior is not born stronger than other men. He is produced by a world that teaches a very particular set of skills from childhood: balance, endurance, archery, observation, patience, movement, and above all, intimacy with the horse. The plains reward those skills, the horse multiplies them. Soon, hunting becomes more productive, travel becomes faster, raids can reach farther. Horse herds themselves become wealth. A successful man may accumulate many animals, and each additional horse creates new possibilities. Fresh mounts allow greater distances. Spare horses can carry goods. Captured horses can be traded. Wealth can now walk. Better still, it can run. And so the transformation feeds itself. Good riders acquire horses. More horses allow longer journeys. Longer journeys create opportunities for trade and raiding. Successful raids bring more horses. More horses create more riders. The cycle turns again. Far to the south, Spanish officials are beginning to notice unfamiliar mounted people appearing with increasing confidence. At first, perhaps the reports do not seem alarming. Colonial administrators are accustomed to writing reports about distant peoples. Names are recorded, locations guessed, threats assessed. The Spanish Empire is enormous. Its officials have seen kingdoms fall. They have watched cities surrender. They have steel weapons, firearms, fortified settlements, churches, soldiers, bureaucrats, and centuries of military tradition behind them. What concern could a relatively small population of mobile hunters cause? The answer will eventually be quite a lot, but not tonight. Not yet. For now, you sit beside a small fire as evening settles over the plains. The horses graze nearby. You hear their teeth pulling at the grass. A child laughs somewhere beyond the firelight. Someone is repairing a bow. Someone else is scraping a hide. Above you, stars emerge one by one until the sky becomes crowded with them. Nothing looks like a revolution. There is no declaration, no king announces a new age, no army marches beneath banners. There is simply a people learning what a horse can do. And perhaps that is the strangest part of the whole story. One of the greatest military transformations in the history of North America begins not with a new weapon forged in a workshop, nor with some grand invention designed by an engineer. It begins with an animal, a bow, an open plain, and generations of children discovering that the distance between themselves and the horizon has suddenly become much shorter. By the time the Spanish fully understand what has happened, the riders on that horizon will no longer be learning. They will be coming toward them. By the early 18th century, the riders on the southern plains are no longer experimenting. They have learned. And now everyone around them is beginning to notice. The change can be seen in the way a Comanche warrior prepares his horse. There is little wasted movement. He checks the animal almost without thinking, running a hand along the tack, feeling the tension of a strap, watching the horse's ears for signs of nervousness. The bow is short enough to use from the saddle. The arrows are close at hand, nothing can interfere with movement, because movement is everything. A Spanish soldier approaching the same battlefield belongs to a very different military world. He may carry a musket, ammunition, powder, and perhaps a sword. His weapons are powerful. Against a stationary target at useful range, the musket can be deadly, but firing it is a small ceremony. Powder must be handled, the weapon must be loaded, the ball must be seated. The soldier must prepare to fire, and after the shot comes smoke. Then he must begin again. A skilled Comanche archer does not have this problem. His hand reaches for another arrow almost as soon as the previous one leaves the bow. Draw, release, reach, draw, release. The rhythm can become astonishingly fast. A highly practiced rider might loose an arrow every few seconds while his horse continues moving beneath him. And the horse changes everything. Imagine standing on the open plains with a musket. There is very little cover. Grass moves in the wind around your boots. Far ahead, several riders appear. They do not approach in a neat line. They spread apart. One turns left, another moves right. Others seem to drift away before suddenly coming closer again. You raise the musket. Which rider do you choose? The one directly ahead changes direction. The one on the right disappears behind another horse. Then the first arrows begin arriving. They do not need to kill everyone. They only need to destroy order. A formation works because men behave together. A Comanche attack tries to make that impossible. Horses panic, men turn, officers shout, smoke obscures the field. And somewhere inside the confusion, the Comanche riders are watching for weakness. They are not interested in proving courage by remaining where your weapon is strongest. That would be foolish. They want you tired, separated, confused. They want you to fire too early. They want you to chase, especially that. A frustrated soldier sees riders retreating and believes the enemy is finally running away, so he follows. Perhaps several men follow with him. The Comanche riders remain just close enough to encourage the pursuit. The distance grows, the soldiers become separated from the larger force. Then the riders turn. What looked like retreat becomes attack. This kind of warfare is deeply unpleasant for armies accustomed to controlling the battlefield. There is no satisfying moment when two lines meet and everyone understands where the fight is. Instead, the battlefield stretches across miles. The enemy may disappear entirely, then return. The Comanche understand something that imperial armies repeatedly struggle to accept. They do not need to occupy the ground beneath your boots. They need to control where you can safely go. That is a different kind of power. And gradually, the territory over which that power operates becomes enormous. Later, outsiders will call it Comancheria. It stretches across a vast portion of the southern Great Plains, including lands that will become parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. But there are no border stones announcing your arrival, no customs house, no gate. You know you have entered Comanche country because everyone behaves differently. Travel becomes cautious. Settlements watch the horizon. Merchants think carefully about routes. Soldiers remain close to their weapons. A landscape can belong to a people without being covered in buildings. That lesson is difficult for Europeans to understand. The Spanish model of control depends heavily on permanence. Build a mission, build a presidio, establish a settlement. Put a road between them, mark the territory on a map. But a Comanche band can simply ride around these fixed points. A fort is powerful only where the fort stands. A horseman is powerful wherever his horse can reach. And a Comanche horse can reach surprisingly far. War parties learn to travel with remarkable efficiency. Riders may change mounts to keep animals fresh. They understand water sources and river crossings. They read tracks in soil that an outsider might consider empty. A broken stem of grass means something. A faint hoofprint means something. Dust on the horizon means something. The plains are not empty to them. They are full of information. This knowledge allows raiding parties to appear where they are least expected. They strike livestock herds. They attack isolated settlements. They capture horses, then they disappear. By the time soldiers receive word and organize a pursuit, the raiders may already be far beyond reach. And this brings us to the horse itself, because calling it transportation does not really explain what has happened. For the Comanche, horses become food security, wealth, military equipment, trade goods, social status, and mobility all at once. A successful warrior may possess many. A wealthy family may manage a substantial herd. Different horses can be valued for different purposes. One may be especially fast, another may have extraordinary endurance, another may remain calm during hunting, and certain animals become trusted war horses. These are not chosen casually. A horse that panics when arrows fly is dangerous. A horse that requires constant control of the reins limits the rider. The ideal animal responds almost invisibly. Pressure from a knee, a shift in weight, a movement of the body. To an observer, it can appear that the horse somehow knows what the rider is thinking. Of course it does not. What the observer is seeing is training repeated until commands become difficult to notice. The same is true of the rider. The extraordinary physical feats later described by visitors do not appear suddenly in adulthood. They begin in childhood. A young rider falls. He gets up. He learns balance. He races other children. He learns how the horse moves before a turn and how its body feels before accelerating. Eventually, he can ride without devoting much conscious attention to riding, that leaves his mind free for everything else: the enemy, the terrain, the bow, the other riders, the escape route. This is one reason descriptions of Comanche horsemanship can sound almost impossible. An outsider sees the final performance. He does not see the thousands of ordinary hours that created it. He sees a warrior hanging from the side of a galloping horse. He does not see the child who practiced balance until falling became unusual. He sees arrows released from a moving saddle. He does not see years spent learning the bow. He sees the horse respond to the rider's knees. He does not see the countless quiet repetitions between animal and human. There is something almost boring beneath every extraordinary skill. Practice. Again. 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 Until the astonishing becomes ordinary. And by the middle decades of the 18th century, the results are becoming painfully obvious to Spain. Military expeditions can punish individual groups. Forts can protect certain places. Diplomats can negotiate temporary agreements. But Spain cannot make the Comanche behave like an enemy. Spain knows how to defeat. There is no single capital waiting to be captured. No king whose surrender ends the war. No central palace where power is concentrated. Comanche society is organized through bands and networks of relationships. Leadership matters, but authority does not resemble a European monarchy. If one group chooses peace, another may not. If soldiers strike one camp, others remain beyond reach. Destroying a village does not destroy a state, because the state the Spanish imagine is not there, And yet Comanche power is very real. That is the contradiction. Loose political organization does not necessarily mean military weakness. In this landscape, it can create resilience. There is nothing obvious to conquer. The harder Spain tries to grab the Comanche world, the more it seems to slip through its fingers. And the Comanche are not merely fighting, they are trading. Horses move outward, metal goods move inward, cloth, weapons, tools, hides, captives, and livestock pass through networks connecting indigenous communities with Spanish and French markets. The warrior who appears terrifying on the battlefield may return to a world of negotiation, family obligations, trade, hunting, and ceremony. This matters because the popular image of the Comanche can become too simple. A mounted warrior silhouetted against the sky is dramatic, but no society survives on dramatic silhouettes. Someone must prepare food, someone must process hides, someone must maintain shelters, someone must manage animals, someone must teach children. Someone must remember where water can be found when the grass turns brown. Behind every warrior riding quickly across the plains stands an entire mobile society capable of supporting that movement. And as night comes down over Comancheria, that society can vanish into the darkness with astonishing ease. Imagine a Spanish patrol reaching the place where a camp stood the previous day. There are ashes, tracks, flattened grass, perhaps a discarded object that was not worth carrying. But the people are gone. The soldiers look toward the horizon. Nothing. The grass moves. The sky darkens. Somewhere far beyond sight, horses are already carrying the camp toward another river, another hunting ground, another place where the soldiers will arrive too late. This is the uncomfortable realization beginning to spread along the Spanish frontier. The Empire possesses better metal, it possesses gunpowder, it possesses fortified towns and professional soldiers, but the Comanche possess something the Empire cannot manufacture inside a fort. They possess the ability to decide when contact happens. They can approach, they can withdraw, they can trade, they can raid, they can vanish. The horse has given them more than speed, it has given them control over distance itself, and on the Great Plains, distance is almost everything. So when a Spanish soldier watches a rider disappear into the evening horizon, he may believe the encounter is over. He does not yet understand. The rider is not fleeing the battlefield. The battlefield is simply much larger than the soldier imagined. And in the generations ahead, Spain, Mexico, Texas, and eventually the United States will all be forced to learn the same exhausting lesson. You cannot easily defeat an enemy who refuses to remain where you expect history to happen. Let us leave the distant Spanish patrol behind and drift deeper into the grasslands, where the making of a Comanche warrior begins long before anyone calls him a warrior. It begins in childhood. And childhood on the southern plains is not particularly interested in keeping you comfortable. Morning arrives cold, even in country remembered for punishing summer heat. The hours before sunrise can carry a sharp chill. You wake beneath hides and blankets while the camp slowly stirs around you. Smoke rises from small fires. Horses shift beyond the lodges. Somewhere nearby, a dog noses through yesterday's scraps. You are perhaps 6 years old. Already the horse is ordinary to you. That fact alone separates your childhood from the lives of most children living across the continent. A Spanish child in San Antonio may see horses every day, but riding is a learned activity. A farmer's son in Europe may spend years working beside horses without ever becoming an expert rider. For you, the animal is part of the landscape of childhood. You know the smell of horses before you understand warfare. You know the warmth of a horse's neck beneath your palm. You know how an animal shifts its weight before moving. You know that ears laid backward can be a warning. You know that a nervous horse must be approached differently from a calm one. These are small pieces of knowledge, but small pieces accumulate. Your first bow is small too. It is made for a child's hands. The weapon cannot deliver the force of an adult bow, and nobody expects it to. Its purpose is repetition. You shoot at simple targets, perhaps a clump of grass, perhaps a mark on the ground, perhaps some object placed at a manageable distance. At first, the arrow goes almost everywhere except where you want it. That is normal, so you retrieve it. You return, you shoot again. The adults around you do not need to explain that this matters. You can see the older boys. You can see the men returning from hunts. You understand what competence looks like because it surrounds you, and so you practice. Again, again, again. Eventually, someone places you on a moving horse and asks you to do the same thing. Now, the target refuses to stay still, or rather you refuse to stay still. The horse rises and falls beneath you. Your arm moves with your body. The distance changes as you approach. The first arrows are terrible. Some land short, some sail wide. Perhaps the other children laugh. You laugh too. Then you retrieve them and try again. There is no mysterious secret here. That is worth remembering. Later observers will describe Comanche riders with language that sometimes makes them sound almost superhuman. But beneath the legend is something much more human. A childhood filled with practice. The body adapts to whatever it repeatedly does. A sailor learns to move across a rolling deck without thinking about every step. A shepherd learns to read the behavior of animals from tiny movements. A craftsperson develops hands that seem to know a task before the mind gives instructions. And a Comanche child raised around horses develops balance that appears extraordinary only to someone who began learning much later. As you grow older, the games become harder. Racing develops speed and judgment. Wrestling develops strength. Running develops endurance. Swimming, where conditions permit, develops confidence and stamina. Children compete, they fall, they bruise themselves, they become tired. And they learn something that will matter enormously later. Discomfort does not always mean stop. The plains teach this lesson without ceremony. There are long journeys, cold mornings, hot afternoons, hunger when hunting is poor. Rain that turns the ground beneath a camp into mud. Wind that pushes smoke into your eyes, no matter where you sit. A warrior culture does not need to invent every hardship used for training. The environment provides plenty for free. By the time you are perhaps 8 or 9, your relationship with the horse has changed again. You are no longer merely staying on its back, you are controlling it. Your knees matter. Your weight matters. The position of your body matters. You begin using your hands less. That freedom is essential. A rider who must constantly hold the reins has one hand occupied. A mounted archer wants both hands available. One holds the bow, the other draws the arrow and string. So you learn to communicate with the horse through pressure and movement. At first, the commands are obvious. Later, they become subtle. The horse turns, the horse slows. The horse accelerates. To someone watching from a distance, you seem barely to move. This is not only training the rider, it is training the animal. The Comanche reputation for horsemanship depends on both. A brilliant rider on a poorly trained horse is limited. A beautifully trained horse beneath an inexperienced rider is equally limited. The frightening combination comes when both understand the same system, and that system is practiced constantly. There is hunting. Buffalo hunting in particular demands courage and control. Imagine approaching an animal far larger than your horse would prefer to approach. The buffalo is massive. Its shoulders rise heavily beneath dark hair. Dust clings to its coat. Its hooves strike the ground with enough force to remind you that one mistake can injure horse and rider alike. Now multiply that animal by hundreds, then thousands. A herd in motion becomes a landscape that moves. The ground trembles. Dust rises. The sound is deep enough to be felt in the body. For a young rider, joining a buffalo hunt is not merely a lesson in obtaining food. It is an education in controlled danger. You must guide your horse close enough for an effective shot without colliding with the herd. You must watch the animal beside you. You must watch the ground. You must remain aware of other riders. You must use your weapon. And all of this happens quickly. There is little time for careful thought. That is precisely why the experience is so valuable. Skills that are slow and deliberate during childhood practice become instinctive under pressure. The buffalo hunt trains many of the same abilities that mounted warfare demands: speed, accuracy, balance, judgment, nerve, the ability to remain functional while enormous animals are running around you. When war eventually comes, the target changes. Many of the physical skills do not, but there is another lesson being taught around you, one that has nothing to do with muscle. Observation. You learn to look at the ground. Tracks are stories. A hoofprint is not merely a hoofprint. How deep is it? How sharp are the edges? Has wind softened it? Has rain touched it? Are there many animals or only a few? Are they walking or running? Which direction? A broken branch can speak. Flattened grass can speak. Ashes can speak. Dung can speak. Dust can speak. The plains seem empty only to people who cannot read them. You are learning to read. This knowledge will later allow Comanche war parties to follow enemies, avoid patrols, locate herds, and estimate how recently travelers pass through an area. It also makes surprise more difficult. A careless stranger leaves information everywhere. A skilled tracker gathers it. As adolescence approaches, expectations grow. The small bow disappears. Your equipment becomes more serious. Your horse becomes more important. Older men watch what you do. Your mistakes still happen, but they matter more now. You begin hearing stories differently too. Around evening fires, men speak of journeys, raids, hunts, enemies, relatives who did not return, horses captured, acts of courage remembered years later. You listen. War is not presented merely as an abstract duty to a distant government. There is no distant king ordering you onto the battlefield. For a young Comanche man, warfare is tied closely to reputation, family, wealth, revenge, opportunity, and personal standing. Horses are especially important. A successful raid can transform a man's circumstances. Captured horses represent wealth that can move with the community. They can be ridden, traded, given away, used to support relatives. A man known for courage and success can build influence, but this also means failure has consequences. Reputation is not inherited automatically. A respected father cannot simply hand his achievements to his son. The son must build his own standing. And so, somewhere in your teenage years, the possibility of joining a raid becomes increasingly real. You have spent much of your childhood preparing without calling it preparation. You can ride, you can shoot, you can endure long days, you can read tracks, you understand horses, you know how to move through the country. But knowing each skill separately is different from using all of them when another human being is trying to kill you. The first raid changes that. You ride with older warriors. Perhaps they tease you, perhaps they say very little. The camp disappears behind you. The familiar sounds grow faint. Ahead lies open country. Hours pass. Then more hours. You learn another truth of mounted warfare. Much of it is not fighting. It is waiting, riding, watching, avoiding detection. Finding water, resting horses, moving again. The dramatic moment may last minutes. The journey around it may consume days. At night you sleep lightly. The ground is hard. Your horse is nearby. The stars overhead are the same stars you saw as a child, but tonight they seem different. You are farther from home. There are men around you whose approval matters. Nobody needs to announce that childhood is ending. You can feel it. Tomorrow may involve stealing horses from an enemy herd. It may involve pursuit. It may involve violence. It may involve nothing at all if the older warriors decide conditions are wrong. That too is part of the education. Courage does not mean attacking whenever an enemy appears. A warrior who cannot control his desire for glory becomes dangerous to his companions. The goal is not to die impressively. The goal is to return, preferably with horses. And so you wait beneath the enormous night sky, listening to the quiet breathing of animals in the darkness. Years of practice have brought you here. The little bow, the races, the falls, the bruises, the cold mornings, the buffalo hunts, the endless hours learning how a horse moves beneath you. Tomorrow, those ordinary childhood lessons may become the difference between returning home and becoming one of the stories told around somebody else's fire. And that is perhaps the most unsettling thing about the famous Comanche warrior. By the time an enemy finally meets him on the plains, the training that makes him dangerous has already been happening for most of his life. The first thing you discover about a raid is that fear does not arrive in the way you expected. It is quieter. There is no great speech. No drumbeat announces the moment. You simply wake in darkness and realize that the older men are already moving. Blankets are folded. Weapons are checked. Horses are brought closer. Voices remain low. The night air feels cool against your face, and somewhere in the darkness a horse gives a soft breath through its nostrils. You rise. Your stomach feels strangely hollow. This is the moment all those years of practice have been leading toward. And yet nobody tells you that you're ready. There is no ceremony that can make an arrow miss you. You mount your horse. The group begins moving. At first, slowly, then faster. The landscape passes as shadow beneath you. Your horse's movement feels familiar, and that familiarity is comforting. You have done this part thousands of times. Ride, watch, listen, keep your balance. Do not waste the animal's strength. The older warriors understand that horses are not machines that can be driven forever. Speed matters, but endurance matters more. A foolish rider can exhaust a good horse. A skilled rider knows when to push and when to slow. This is one reason a Comanche war party can be so difficult to catch. Its mobility is managed carefully. Fresh mounts may be available. Riders know where water is likely to be found. They understand which ground is difficult after rain and where movement can remain hidden from distant eyes. The landscape is part of the weapon. By dawn. Perhaps you are watching an enemy camp from a distance. You do not ride straight toward it, you wait. Waiting is harder than you imagined. Every childhood story emphasized the exciting moments because those are the moments people remember. But successful raiding often depends on avoiding excitement until precisely the right time. The older men observe how many horses, how many people. Where are the animals kept? Which direction offers the easiest escape? Is anyone already awake? Where will pursuit come from? Nothing is done merely because it would look brave. The purpose is success. Eventually, a decision passes through the group. You move. Now the years of training begin compressing into moments. Your horse accelerates. Cold air tears at your eyes. The quiet landscape suddenly fills with movement. People shout, animals scatter, someone is running. You hear hooves striking earth. And then your body begins doing things faster than conscious thought can organize them. Your knees control the horse. Your hands remain free. An arrow comes from its place. The bow rises, draw, release. Another arrow, draw, release. There is no pause to admire what you have done. A mounted archer survives by continuing to move. This is the quality that European and American observers later struggle to describe without sounding amazed. A skilled Comanche warrior can combine tasks that outsiders learn separately. He rides while aiming. He aims while changing direction. He changes direction while observing other riders. He controls the horse while both hands are occupied. And if necessary, he can shift his body almost completely away from the saddle. You have practiced that too. The maneuver begins with balance. At speed, you lower yourself along one side of the horse. Your leg holds you. Your body disappears behind the animal's shoulder and ribs. To the person facing you, there is suddenly very little human target left. The horse becomes cover. You can look beneath its neck. Your bow can appear below the animal. An arrow can be released from a position that seems absurd to anyone trained to fight upright. Later observers will describe such feats with disbelief, but you are not performing for them. You are trying to remain alive. There is a practical reason behind almost everything. Hanging beside the horse reduces your exposure. Knee control frees your hands. The short bow is easier to use from horseback than a long weapon. Rapid movement makes return fire more difficult. Multiple mounts preserve mobility. Loose formations prevent one volley from striking a dense group. The result looks wild. It is not. Beneath the apparent chaos is a system adapted carefully to the plains. This becomes especially obvious when firearms enter the picture. A musket is frightening. The sound alone can shake an inexperienced horse. Smoke erupts from the barrel. At useful range, the projectile can cause terrible injury. The Comanche do not misunderstand this. They do not believe bows are magically superior to guns. Instead, they exploit the limitations of the firearms available during much of the 18th and early 19th centuries. A muzzle-loading weapon must be reloaded after firing. That takes time. The mounted archer wants to make those seconds unbearable. Imagine you're a soldier, you fire. Perhaps you miss. Now the rider knows something important. Your weapon is empty. He can close distance, he can release arrows, he can change direction before you finish reloading. If several riders are doing this at once, the problem becomes worse. You are no longer fighting only men. You are fighting time. The Comanche rider tries to control that time. He wants you to fire when the shot is poor. He wants you nervous. He wants your horse frightened. He wants you separated from your companions. Then he wants to be somewhere else before you recover. This does not mean Comanche warriors are invincible. No warrior is. Arrows miss. Horses stumble. Ambushes fail. Firearms improve. Enemies adapt. Men who have spent their entire lives riding can still be killed. The mythology becomes misleading if we forget that. What makes the Comanche extraordinary is not supernatural ability. It is the degree to which their skills fit their environment. The plains reward mobility, so they become mobile. Mounted combat rewards balance, so balance is trained from childhood. Rapid archery rewards repetition, so children begin with bows suited to their size. Long-distance raiding requires endurance. So riders learn to manage themselves and their animals across immense distances. Survival rewards observation, so the ground itself becomes a source of information. Every skill reinforces another. And then there's the horse. Always the horse. A good war horse is more than an animal beneath you. It is your speed, your escape, your height above the ground, your ability to choose distance, your ability to carry weapons. Sometimes it is your shield. Lose the horse at the wrong moment, and the entire equation changes. That is why horse wealth matters so deeply. A successful warrior wants more than one useful mount. One animal can tire, one can become lame. One can be injured, a spare changes what is possible. And horses can be captured. So warfare creates wealth, and wealth creates greater military mobility, which can produce further success in warfare. The circle strengthens itself. But reputation is not measured only by what a man keeps. Generosity matters. A successful warrior can distribute horses among relatives and companions. Wealth creates obligations. Achievement becomes visible not simply because a man owns many animals, but because he has enough to give. This social world helps explain why courage carries such weight. A warrior is not an isolated figure riding for private adventure. His actions affect family. His success can support others. His failure can leave relatives grieving. His reputation becomes part of a larger network of relationships. And women are central to the society that makes this mobile life possible. While popular images often focus almost entirely on mounted men, camps survive through enormous amounts of labor. Buffalo hides must be processed. Food must be prepared and preserved. Shelters must be maintained. Children must be cared for. Possessions must be packed when the community moves. A mobile society requires organization. When a camp relocates, the work is substantial. Yet movement is so deeply built into daily life that a community can dismantle its living space and travel with a speed that astonishes outsiders accustomed to permanent settlements. This is another military advantage hidden inside ordinary domestic life. An army may capture a town, but what happens when there is no town? It may burn a building, but what happens when the shelter can be rebuilt? It may seize a road. But what happens when the people do not require that road? The Comanche world frustrates outsiders because its strength is distributed. It lives in horses, knowledge, families, relationships, memory, movement. There is no single stone fortress containing the whole thing. And so you return from your first raid with a different understanding of what being a warrior means. Perhaps you return with horses. Perhaps you return with little except experience. Perhaps someone who rode out beside you does not return at all. That possibility changes the mood when the camp finally appears on the horizon. Children run outward. Dogs bark. People search the returning group for familiar faces. Success and grief can arrive together. You dismount. Your legs are tired. Dust covers your clothing. Your horse lowers its head. Someone asks what happened. The story begins. But you notice something strange. The events that felt enormous while they were happening become simpler when spoken aloud. You rode. You waited. You moved. You survived. The people listening cannot feel the cold morning air or the sudden hollow sensation in your stomach when danger came close. Those things remain yours. Tonight, you sit beside a fire, much like the fires you sat beside as a child. Only now younger boys are listening to you. They watch the warriors. They study the horses. Tomorrow they will race across the grass. They will practice with their small bows. They will fall. They will climb back into the saddle. Again, again, again. And years from now, some frightened soldier may encounter one of those boys as a grown man and wonder how a human being learned to ride like that. He will not see this evening. He will not see the little bow. He will not see the bruised knees or the thousands of ordinary rides. He will see only the final result. A horse coming fast across open country. A rider whose hands seem impossibly quick, an arrow already in the air. And that may be the real secret behind the reputation of the Comanche warrior. The extraordinary thing was never that he ignored the limits of the human body. It was that almost every part of his life had trained that body for one particular world. A world of grass, distance, buffalo, danger, and horses. To an outsider, he could appear like a freak of nature. But nature had only provided the plains. The rest had taken a lifetime of practice. We drift onward now, deeper into the forgotten days, leaving the training ground and the evening fire behind. The boy who once practiced with a small bow is grown, his horse is stronger, his hands are quicker. And somewhere beyond the dark horizon, people are beginning to look nervously at the moon. There is something especially unsettling about danger arriving on a beautiful night. A full moon over the southern plains can be enormous. It rises pale above the horizon and pours silver light across the grass. Rivers shine beneath it. Horse trails become faint grey lines. A rider can see the ground ahead without carrying a torch. For most travelers, this is useful. For settlers living along the frontier, it can become frightening, because moonlight allows Comanche war parties to travel at night. In later frontier memory, the phrase Comanche moon becomes associated with this fear. You can understand why. Imagine living on an isolated ranch somewhere in Texas. The nearest substantial settlement may be many miles away. There is no telegraph line beside your house, no patrol waiting just beyond the fence. If something happens, help must first hear about it. Someone must ride for assistance, then assistance must ride back. That takes time. The Comanche understand time very well. More importantly, they understand distance. A raiding party can move after sunset, using moonlight to cross country, while the people ahead are sleeping. The riders do not need roads. They know water, they know landmarks, they know the shape of the country. A long night in the saddle can carry them astonishingly far. Then shortly before dawn they slow. The target lies ahead. Horses breathe quietly in the darkness. Men wait. This is not the dramatic part of warfare. It is the patient part. And patience is what makes the dramatic part possible. You sit on your horse and watch the eastern horizon begin to lighten. The world is almost silent. A few birds start calling. Someone in the distant settlement may already be awake, perhaps preparing a fire, perhaps stepping outside without any idea that riders are waiting beyond sight. The war party has chosen this hour carefully. People are vulnerable during transitions. At night, they are asleep. By full daylight, they are alert. But dawn sits between the two. The body is slow. Animals are being fed. Doors open. People begin ordinary tasks. Then the riders move. There is no need to remain hidden now. Speed replaces silence. Hooves strike the earth. The sound grows rapidly. Dogs begin barking. Someone shouts. And by the time everyone understands what is happening, the attack is already underway. This is where descriptions of Comanche raiding can become misleading. If we imagine nothing except uncontrolled violence, the raids have purposes. Horses are especially valuable. Livestock can be taken. Captives may be seized. Enemies can be punished. A successful raid increases wealth and reputation while weakening rivals. The goal is usually not to occupy the settlement. Holding fixed ground would sacrifice the greatest Comanche advantage, mobility. So the attack can be brief. The riders enter quickly. They create confusion, they gather what can be moved, then they leave. The temptation for defenders is pursuit. Sometimes that is exactly what the raiders want. A handful of riders may remain visible. They retreat slowly enough to be followed. Angry defenders mount horses and chase them. At first, the pursuit feels successful. The Comanche are running, the distance closes, or seems to. Then the terrain changes. Perhaps the riders disappear beyond a low ridge. The pursuers follow, and suddenly there are more Comanche waiting beyond it. The retreat was not panic. It was an invitation. This is one of the oldest battlefield tricks in human history, but mounted warriors on open plains can perform it with particular effectiveness. A disciplined soldier knows he should be cautious. A furious man watching his horses disappear may forget discipline. The Comanche exploit emotion as readily as terrain. Fear can be useful. Anger can be even more useful. An angry enemy makes decisions quickly. Quick decisions are often poor ones. So you do not merely outrun the enemy. Sometimes you encourage him to exhaust himself trying to catch you. Then you turn. The open plains make these games of distance possible on a scale that can bewilder outsiders. A European officer may think in terms of holding a hill, defending a road, or capturing a fortified position. The Comanche warrior thinks about whether the enemy's horse is tired, where the nearest water lies, how much daylight remains, whether dust on the horizon reveals another group, whether a river crossing will slow pursuit, whether a line of hills can conceal movement. The battlefield is not a place, it is the entire journey. This helps explain how a relatively small population can influence such an enormous territory. Comancheria does not function like a European kingdom. There is no single border wall, there is no capital from which officials administer every corner. There is no king sitting on a throne issuing daily orders to every band. Instead, power moves. One band may be hunting, another trading, another visiting relatives, another preparing a raid. Leadership can shift according to circumstance. A man respected in war may not simply command every decision in ordinary life. Individual bands possess considerable independence. To an empire, this can look disorganized until the empire tries to conquer it. Then decentralization becomes maddening. Suppose Spanish soldiers attack one camp. They have not captured the Comanche capital. There is no Comanche capital. Suppose they force one leader to negotiate. Other leaders may have different interests. Suppose they occupy a strategic point. Comanche riders may simply alter their routes. The Spanish are trying to hold the landscape. The Comanche are trying to remain free within it. These are not the same objective, and so Spanish forts rise along the frontier. Thick walls, garrisons, storehouses, weapons, flags. From the Spanish perspective, these are symbols of permanence from the saddle. They can look like islands. A presidio protects the ground around it, but a mounted raiding party can travel beyond that ground. It can pass between fortified points. It can strike the ranches and settlements that those forts are supposed to defend. Then it can disappear before soldiers assemble. The stronger the fort becomes, the more absurd the situation may feel. The soldiers are safe behind their walls, the countryside outside them is not, and chasing the raiders produces another problem. A military column is heavy. Soldiers require supplies, supplies require animals, animals require forage and water, equipment breaks. Men become sick. Orders must be followed. A column moving through unfamiliar country cannot simply dissolve into the plains. A Comanche war party is lighter. Its riders know the terrain. Their logistical needs are different. They can separate. They can reunite. They can abandon one route for another. This means the Spanish may spend days pursuing people who never intended to be caught. Imagine the frustration. Every morning you find tracks. Every evening the tracks continue. Perhaps you discover an abandoned campsite. The ashes are cold. You estimate the Comanche left hours earlier, or perhaps a day earlier. Your horses are tiring. Your supplies are shrinking. Then the trail divides. Now what? Half the riders appear to have gone north. Others went west. A smaller group seems to have turned toward a river. Did the war party divide? Are some tracks deliberate? Which group carries the stolen horses? Which group is bait? The plains provide no answer, only more horizon. Eventually, the officer must decide whether to continue. And somewhere ahead, men who have spent their lives reading this country already know what he is likely to do. That is another weapon no blacksmith can forge: local knowledge. You know which streams remain wet during dry weather. You know where buffalo tend to move. You know where a horse can descend safely into a canyon. You know which patches of ground become mud after rain. You know where a large group will leave obvious tracks and where rocky soil will hide them. To the outsider, this may look like wilderness. To you, it is a map carried in memory, and memory weighs nothing. No supply wagon is required. This becomes part of the larger Comanche system. Speed alone is not enough. A rider moving quickly in the wrong direction is merely lost faster. Mobility becomes military power only when combined with information. Scouts ride ahead, tracks are examined, travelers are questioned. News moves through trade networks. Reports of settlements, livestock, military patrols, and rival groups become valuable. The Comanche are not wandering randomly across the plains. Their movements follow knowledge, and their trade networks expand that knowledge. Spanish settlements around New Mexico provide goods. French traders approaching from the east provide other opportunities. Horses, hides, metal objects, firearms, cloth, and captives move through complicated exchanges. Trade and war exist beside one another. A group that fights today may negotiate tomorrow. A merchant may enter territory where a soldier would be attacked. A rival may become temporarily useful. This is politics conducted without marble palaces. The absence of a European-style government does not mean the absence of diplomacy. In fact, diplomacy becomes essential precisely because authority is spread across many relationships. And by the later 18th century, Spanish officials are being forced toward an uncomfortable conclusion. They cannot simply destroy Comanche power. Military expeditions have not solved the problem. Fortifications have not solved it. Alliances with Comanche enemies have not solved it. The plains remain stubbornly beyond reliable Spanish control, so eventually negotiation becomes more attractive. Peace agreements are attempted. Trade relationships are formalized. Gifts are exchanged. Promises are made. This may look on paper like the empire bringing troublesome frontier people under control, but the reality is less flattering. Spain negotiates because war has become expensive and ineffective. The Comanche negotiate because peace can also be useful. That distinction matters. They are not simply submitting, they are choosing among strategies. Raid when raiding is profitable, trade when trading is profitable, negotiate when negotiation produces advantages. Move when staying is dangerous. There is a cold practicality to it. And now return to that moonlit Texas ranch. The family inside does not know any of this larger political story. They do not know what negotiations are happening hundreds of miles away. They do not know which band is at peace with whom. They know only that the moon is bright, the horses outside are restless. A dog has begun barking toward the darkness. Someone opens the door. The grass beyond the house appears empty. Perhaps it is. Perhaps the riders are miles away, or perhaps they are already watching. This uncertainty becomes part of frontier life. The Comanche do not need to attack every settlement. They do not need to appear every full moon. Fear does some of the work for them. People bring livestock closer. Travel is postponed. Men sleep lightly. Settlements request soldiers. Rumors move faster than facts. One successful raid can frighten communities far beyond the place actually attacked. That is how a small population projects power across a huge landscape, not by standing everywhere, by making everyone wonder where they might appear next. And perhaps that is the real meaning of the Comanche moon. The moon itself is innocent. It rises as it always has, pouring pale light over grass and river water. But human beings are very good at attaching memory to ordinary things. A road becomes frightening because someone vanished there. A forest becomes haunted because a battle happened beneath its trees. And a beautiful full moon becomes ominous because generations of frontier families learned that bright nights made long-distance riding easier. So the next time the moon rises over the southern plains, imagine the quiet, a silver horizon, cool grass, horses breathing softly, and somewhere beyond the reach of a Spanish fort, a line of riders moving through the night without torches. They are not lost. They know exactly where they are going. The people waiting unknowingly ahead of them may not even realize they are living inside a battlefield. Because in Comancheria, the battlefield has no walls. It begins wherever the horses can reach. The moon eventually sinks toward the western horizon, but the larger struggle does not end with daylight. If anything, daylight makes the scale of the problem easier to see. Imagine riding to the top of a low rise somewhere on the southern Great Plains and stopping your horse. Before you lies an ocean made of grass. There are no city walls, no neat fields reaching from village to village. No church towers marking every few miles of settled country. The horizon is enormous. Somewhere far to the west lie the mountains of New Mexico. To the south, beyond distances that can consume days in the saddle, are Spanish and later Mexican settlements. To the east are forests, rivers, traders, and eventually the expanding settlements of the United States. And in the middle of this vast world lies Comanche. It is tempting to imagine it as a country in the modern sense. That would be misleading. There is no single government office where someone draws its borders. There is no capital. There is no king. There is not even one Comanche leader who can command every band. Yet the territory is real because power does not always require paperwork. Power can be measured by a simpler question. Who can move safely here? For much of the 18th century, the answer across a huge portion of the southern plains is clear. The Comanche can. Their enemies often cannot. This creates a strange reversal. Spain appears vastly stronger on paper. Its empire reaches across oceans. Its officials correspond with distant capitals. Its soldiers carry firearms. Its settlements contain workshops, churches, storehouses, and stone buildings. The Comanche population is tiny by comparison. Yet, Spain faces a problem that imperial strength does not easily solve. Its power becomes weaker with distance. Every soldier sent onto the plains must eat. Every horse must drink. Every musket requires powder and ammunition. Every expedition must know where it is going. A military force that looks impressive near a fortified settlement can become vulnerable after several days in unfamiliar country. The Comanche live inside that country. They do not need to invade it. They are already home. This is one reason Spanish campaigns repeatedly produce frustration. A commander may leave a presidio determined to punish a particular band. His column rides for days. Scouts search for tracks. Perhaps they discover a camp. Perhaps they do not. If the Comanche know the soldiers are approaching, the camp can move. Shelters come down, possessions are loaded, horse herds are gathered, children, older people, and families depart. By the time the Spanish arrive, the place may contain little more than cold ashes and flattened grass. The commander has captured a campsite. The people he came to defeat are somewhere beyond the horizon. This is not a glorious victory. So Spain tries another method. Alliances, the Comanche have enemies of their own. Perhaps those enemies can be encouraged to fight them. Weapons can be traded, agreements can be made. Old rivalries can be used. This is a familiar imperial strategy, but here again, the plains refuse to behave conveniently. During the expansion of Comanche power, Apache groups are pushed away from large portions of the southern plains. The struggle is long and complicated, and it should not be reduced to a single dramatic battle. There is no afternoon when one army wins Comancheria. Instead, pressure accumulates. Hunting grounds shift. Horse herds are taken. Raids weaken communities. Access to trade changes. Families move. Year after year, the balance of power turns. Eventually, the Comanche emerge as the dominant mounted force across much of the region, and dominance brings opportunity. Trade grows. This is one of the quieter parts of the story, but it may be among the most important. A Comanche warrior carrying a bow is easy to remember. A Comanche trader negotiating over horses is less dramatic. Yet both belong to the same system. Horses are enormously valuable throughout the borderlands. The Comanche possess them in large numbers. Spanish settlements want horses. Other indigenous peoples want horses. Traders want hides. The Comanche want metal tools, weapons, cloth, and other manufactured goods. So goods begin flowing through Comancheria. A horse captured in one place can be traded somewhere else. A metal object produced far away can eventually arrive in a mobile camp on the plains. News travels with the goods. Who is fighting whom? Which settlement has many animals? Where have soldiers been seen? Which traders are offering favorable terms? Who has suffered from disease? Where are buffalo herds moving? Information becomes another commodity. A society that outsiders sometimes describe as isolated is actually connected to a broad frontier economy. And the Comanche learn to use those connections. They can trade with one power while pressuring another. They can negotiate with Spanish authorities without becoming Spanish subjects. Later, when political control changes around them, they adjust again. This adaptability is essential because the world surrounding Comancheria refuses to remain still. Spain eventually loses control of Mexico. Mexico becomes independent. Farther east, American settlement continues expanding. Texas breaks from Mexico. Governments change. Flags change. Borders are redrawn. The Comanche remain. From their perspective, the people claiming authority over neighboring territory seem to replace one another with surprising regularity. The horse does not care which flag flies above San Antonio. Neither does distance. And when Mexico inherits the northern frontier, it also inherits the old problem. How do you defend scattered settlements against riders who choose when and where to strike? The answer proves no easier for Mexico than it had for Spain. In fact, conditions in northern Mexico become increasingly severe. Comanche war parties travel south across the Rio Grande and deep into Mexican territory. The distances involved are extraordinary. A raid can become an expedition lasting weeks. Riders need fresh horses. They need knowledge of water. They need to avoid military forces when avoidance is useful. And they need to return with captured animals across enormous stretches of country. This is not random wandering. It requires organization. Picture a column of Comanche riders returning north. They are not necessarily riding at full speed. That would exhaust the animals. Instead, the group manages its pace. Captured horses move with them. Scouts watch the country. Dust rises behind the herd. Every river crossing becomes a logistical problem. Every day spent traveling increases the possibility of pursuit. Yet the sheer mobility of the group remains its protection. Mexican forces may receive news of the raid only after the Comanche have already left the area. Orders must travel, men must gather, horses must be prepared. By then, the raiders are farther away. Again, the enemy is not merely fighting warriors, he is fighting distance. Northern communities feel the consequences. Some settlements become increasingly vulnerable, ranches lose animals, travel becomes dangerous. Families abandon exposed areas, governments offer rewards and organize retaliatory expeditions. But retaliation has the same old difficulty. Where exactly should it go? A map can show where a raid occurred. It cannot show where the raiders will be tomorrow. This imbalance gives the Comanches something greater than battlefield success. It gives them strategic influence. They can affect where other people settle. They can make certain routes dangerous. They can increase the cost of colonial expansion. They can force governments to spend money defending frontier regions. They can make diplomacy preferable to war. That is a remarkable amount of power for a people whose population is small compared with the states surrounding them. But there is a darker side to this system. Raiding is not an adventure story for the people being raided. Homes are destroyed, people are killed, captives are taken, families disappear into grief, Comanche communities suffer violence in return. Retaliatory expeditions kill people who may have had little connection to the original attack. Cycles of revenge become difficult to stop because each side remembers its own dead more clearly than the dead of the other. This is frontier warfare stripped of romance. There is courage, there is skill, there is also suffering. And captives occupy a complicated place within the Comanche world. Some remain outsiders, some are exchanged, some are adopted. Some eventually become deeply integrated into Comanche families. Identity on the plains can become more complicated than the categories used later in history books. A person born among one people may spend much of life among another. Languages can change. Names can change. Family ties can change. The border between Comanche and outsider is not always as simple as blood. This will matter greatly later when we reach the story of Quanapaka and his mother. For now, it is enough to understand that Comancheria is not merely a military zone. It is a living human world. Children are born here. Families argue here. People fall in love here. Old people remember landscapes younger generations have never seen. Hunters watch the buffalo. Women work hides. Traders arrive. War parties depart. Some return triumphantly. Some return quietly. Some never return. And above all of it lies the constant need to move. Movement makes Comanche power possible, but movement also demands enormous labor. A camp cannot simply wander without planning. Water matters, grass matters, buffalo matter, seasons matter. A large horse herd consumes resources quickly. If grazing becomes poor, the animals weaken. If water is scarce, the camp must move. If buffalo shift, hunters follow. Military strength is therefore connected to ecology. The warrior who appears almost unstoppable in battle depends on grass beneath his horse and animals across the plains. For now, those systems remain abundant enough to support Comanche power. The buffalo herds still seem almost endless. Horses multiply. The grasslands stretch beyond sight. And so the Comanche can continue doing what fixed armies struggle to do. They can move the center of their world whenever circumstances demand it. A Spanish fort cannot do that. A Mexican town cannot do that. A stone mission cannot wake tomorrow and relocate beside another river. The Comanche camp can. That simple difference explains more than any dramatic duel between warrior and soldier. An empire invests power in places. The Comanche invest power in people, animals, knowledge, and movement. For decades, movement wins. But now another people are approaching from the east. They bring their own traditions of frontier violence. They bring rifles, they bring settlers hungry for land. And eventually, they will bring a weapon that changes mounted combat itself. The people of the new Republic of Texas will initially believe they are facing a familiar frontier problem. They will discover otherwise. Their infantry will struggle. Their cavalry will struggle. Their settlements will learn the same old habit of watching the horizon. And eventually, some Texans will come to a disturbing conclusion. If they cannot force the Comanche to fight like Texans, then Texans may have to learn to fight more like the Comanche. So as evening settles over Comancheria, another transformation is quietly approaching. Not among the Comanche this time, among their enemies. Because after generations of trying to catch the wind, the people moving into Texas are about to stop asking how to make the wind stand still. They are going to learn how to ride with it. Let us cross the river now, away from the old Spanish frontier and into a younger, rougher country where another government is about to discover that changing the flag does not change the plains. Texas has entered the story. And Texas has a problem. When the Republic of Texas declares independence from Mexico in the 1830s, its leaders inherit settlements, enormous territorial ambitions, and a frontier they barely control. On maps, the new republic looks impressive. On horseback, the reality is different. Much of the West remains Comanche country. A government may draw a line across paper and announce that everything inside it belongs to the republic. The grass does not notice, neither do the Comanche. To them, these newcomers are simply another population moving into lands where Comanche hunters, traders, families, and war parties already travel. And the Texans are about to make many of the same mistakes their predecessors made. They build settlements. They send patrols, they organize militias, they assume enough armed men can eventually impose order. Then the riders appear. A settlement may receive no warning at all. One moment, the morning is ordinary. Someone is repairing a fence. Someone is feeding livestock. A child is carrying water. Then dogs begin barking. Horses become restless. A figure appears on the horizon. Then another. Then many more. By the time someone understands what is happening, the distance has already collapsed. This is the Comanche advantage in its simplest form. They can turn empty horizon into immediate danger. The Texans discover that traditional infantry is poorly suited to answering that danger. A man on foot may possess an excellent firearm. It does not matter if his enemy refuses to remain within useful range. Mounted troops seem like the obvious answer. But merely owning a horse does not make someone the equal of a rider who has spent most of his life in the saddle. Texan horses tire, formations break, Comanche riders scatter, the pursuit continues. Then suddenly the hunters become the hunted. The Texans need something different, but before that adaptation fully develops, the relationship between Texas and the Comanche becomes much worse. One of the most consequential moments comes in San Antonio during the early 1840s. Comanche representatives enter the town to negotiate over captives. The meeting is supposed to be diplomatic. That alone tells you something important. Even after years of violence, both sides understand that talking can sometimes achieve what fighting cannot. but negotiations involving captives are especially dangerous. Families want relatives returned. Comanche leaders have their own expectations. Texan officials believe promises have not been fulfilled. Suspicion fills the room before weapons ever appear. The Comanche delegation brings a captive with them. Texan authorities expect more. The Texans decide to detain the negotiators until other captives are released. From their perspective, hostages may seem like leverage. From the Comanche perspective, people who entered under the protection of negotiations are being seized. The room becomes tense. Words fail. Then violence begins. What follows will be remembered as the Council House fight. The exact details are argued over in later accounts, as details often are when survivors on opposing sides remember a chaotic event. But the essential result is clear. Comanche men and women die. Texans die. And diplomacy collapses into bloodshed. The consequences travel far beyond San Antonio. Among the Comanche, the deaths demand an answer. That answer comes later that year. A war leader known to the Texans as Buffalo Hump helps lead a major expedition into settled Texas. This is not a small raid slipping quietly across an isolated frontier. Hundreds of mounted warriors move south. The scale alone creates panic. Settlements that have grown accustomed to worrying about smaller war parties now face something much larger. The riders move through the country with the same fundamental advantages the Comanche have used for generations: speed, surprise, mobility, knowledge of horses, the ability to choose when to fight and when to leave. Victoria is threatened. Then the raiders reach Linville, a port settlement on the Gulf Coast. Consider the psychological effect of that journey. The Comanche are supposed to belong somewhere far away on the plains, yet now mounted warriors have reached the coast. The frontier suddenly feels much larger, or perhaps much smaller. Distance has failed to provide safety. Linville is attacked and looted. Residents flee toward boats and water. Goods are taken, buildings burn. And in one of the stranger images from the entire conflict, Comanche riders reportedly leave the town carrying clothing and merchandise from the stores they have plundered. There is something almost unreal about it. Warriors who have ridden hundreds of miles across the plains are now near the sea, surrounded by goods from an expanding commercial world. But the deeper lesson is not amusing. The Comanche have demonstrated reach. A government that cannot protect settlements hundreds of miles inside the territory it claims has a serious problem. Texan forces pursue. Eventually, the returning Comanche encounter armed resistance. The raiding expedition suffers losses. The war party does not simply destroy everything without consequence. That matters because the history becomes distorted if every Comanche action is treated as effortless victory. The Texans are learning, slowly, painfully. They begin creating a military culture better suited to the enemy they actually face. The Texas Rangers become central to that process. The Rangers are not a conventional European-style army. They operate in smaller groups. They ride, they scout. They travel lighter. They learn the country. In other words, the frontier begins changing them. This is what happens when an enemy repeatedly exposes the weaknesses in your system. You either adapt or continue losing. A ranger riding across Texas cannot afford to behave like a soldier marching beside a supply wagon in Europe. He needs mobility. He needs endurance. He needs to read tracks. He needs to spend long periods in the saddle. He needs to react independently because orders from a distant commander may arrive far too late. Most importantly, he needs a weapon suitable for mounted fighting. And here the Comanche still possess a brutal advantage. Imagine a ranger carrying a single-shot pistol. He fires. Now the pistol is useless until he reloads. Reloading from horseback is awkward. Reloading while an enemy is charging is worse. Across from him, a Comanche warrior can continue sending arrows. The bow may seem technologically older than the firearm. In this particular situation, that does not necessarily make it less effective. Technology matters only when it fits the problem. A musket has tremendous power. A bow has speed. The Comanche have built their style of warfare around that speed. The Texans need to close the gap. Fortunately for them, a new kind of firearm is emerging. The revolver early repeating handguns are not perfect. They can be unreliable. They require careful handling, but the basic idea changes everything. Instead of firing once and immediately becoming vulnerable during reloading, a mounted man can fire several times in succession. For the first time, a ranger has something approaching the rapid, offensive rhythm that has made Comanche mounted archery so dangerous. The transformation does not happen overnight. Weapons alone never solve everything. A poor rider with a revolver is still a poor rider. A man who cannot find water is still lost. A patrol that cannot track its enemy is still blind. But repeating firearms remove one of the most painful disadvantages. Now imagine a future encounter. A Comanche rider approaches. He expects the first shot. The ranger fires. Normally, this is the moment to exploit. The firearm should now be empty. But then comes another shot, and another. The old rhythm has changed. For generations, Comanche warriors have understood the pauses built into enemy weapons. Now those pauses are disappearing. This is the beginning of a larger shift. Samuel Colt's revolver designs become increasingly important to mounted forces. Texas Ranger Samuel Walker later works with Colt on a powerful repeating handgun intended for frontier combat. The resulting weapon becomes famous, but the important point is larger than any single model. The enemies of the Comanche are adapting their technology to a style of warfare shaped by the Comanche themselves. That is an extraordinary kind of influence. You do not need to conquer another society to change it. Sometimes forcing your enemy to redesign how he fights is evidence enough. The Rangers become more mobile because the Comanche are mobile. They learn frontier scouting because the Comanche make conventional movement inadequate. They value repeating firearms because single-shot weapons leave them vulnerable against rapid mounted attacks. The war is reshaping both sides, yet the Comanche still hold an enormous advantage that cannot be manufactured in a gun shop. Experience. A revolver can be purchased, a childhood cannot. A ranger may become an excellent horseman after years on the frontier, but he cannot go backward and begin riding before he remembers learning to walk. The Comanche warrior carries thousands of hours of unconscious practice in his body. The difference appears in tiny moments. A horse stumbles. The Comanche rider corrects automatically. A shot passes nearby. He changes position without stopping his attack. His mount turns beneath him from pressure almost invisible to an observer. These fractions of a second matter. Battle often belongs to whoever must think about fewer things, and yet something important has changed. The technological gap is narrowing. The tactical gap is narrowing. The Texans are no longer merely asking how to defend settlements. They are learning how to pursue, how to scout, how to remain mounted, how to fight at close range without becoming helpless after one shot. The wind is still difficult to catch, but now the people chasing it have better horses, better weapons, and decades of painful lessons behind them. Around a fire somewhere on the plains, a Comanche warrior may clean his bow and look toward the east. He cannot see the factories, he cannot see the workshops, he cannot see the population moving steadily westward. But the world beyond the horizon is changing. And for the first time, that change is beginning to produce enemies who can imitate some of the advantages that once belonged overwhelmingly to him. The Comanche have taught Texas how dangerous mounted warfare can be. Texas has been an unwilling student, but it has been learning, and soon the lesson will become much more dangerous for the teacher. Now we move farther into the 19th century, where the old contest between bow and gun begins to change. Not suddenly, not cleanly, and certainly not because the Comanche have forgotten how to fight. The change comes slowly, carried westward in saddle holsters, ammunition boxes, wagon trains, and the growing confidence of enemies who have spent years learning painful lessons on the plains. For a long time, one of the strangest advantages possessed by the Comanche warrior has been the speed of his weapon. To someone unfamiliar with firearms, this sounds backward. The gun seems modern, the bow seems ancient. Surely the gun must be better, but weapons do not fight by themselves. A weapon exists inside a particular environment, in the hands of a particular person, facing a particular problem. And on horseback, against a fast-moving enemy, the older weapon can possess surprising advantages. Imagine yourself riding across open Texas with a single-shot pistol. The Comanche rider ahead of you is moving sideways. You raise the weapon, you fire. Smoke bursts between you. The shot misses. Now comes the dangerous part. Your enemy knows you have fired. He does not need to guess. He understands your weapon. He knows that before you can shoot again, you must reload. The Comanche rider turns. His bow comes up, one arrow leaves, then another. Your horse is moving, your hands are occupied, your heart is beating hard. Suddenly, the supposedly primitive weapon feels considerably less primitive. The problem is not the power of your pistol. The problem is what happens after the first shot. Repeating firearms begin to change that calculation. The revolver offers a mounted fighter something precious: time. One shot no longer means helplessness. The first chamber fires, then another can be brought into position, and another, a ranger who would once have been dangerously exposed after firing, can remain dangerous. This does not instantly make him superior to the Comanche, but it removes one of the assumptions around which Comanche tactics have developed. The empty gun is no longer always empty. That uncertainty matters. Samuel Walker, a Texas Ranger and later an officer, becomes closely associated with the development of a powerful Colt revolver suited to mounted fighting. The resulting handgun is heavy, very heavy. It is not a delicate little object hidden beneath a coat. It is a substantial weapon intended for serious use from horseback, and its importance lies not merely in its power. It gives a mounted fighter several shots before reloading. That sounds ordinary to us, because repeating firearms eventually become ordinary. To a man accustomed to single-shot weapons, it is revolutionary. Imagine being a Comanche warrior encountering this change. You have spent years learning the rhythm of the enemy. That rhythm has kept you alive. You know approximately what happens after the flash and smoke. You know when to close. You know when the other man is vulnerable. Now the rhythm lies to you. The gun fires. You move. Then it fires again. Suddenly, an old instinct can become dangerous. This is how military technology often changes warfare. Not because the new weapon makes every old skill useless, but because it alters the timing around which those skills were built. Still, a revolver does not teach courage. It does not teach tracking. It does not make a horse obey pressure from the knees. It does not tell a ranger where water lies after days of dry travel. So the Texans continue learning from their enemy. Small groups become important. Scouting becomes important. Good horses become important. Independent judgment becomes important. The ranger must think less like a soldier in a European formation and more like the mounted men he is trying to catch. There is a peculiar irony here. For years, settlers described Comanche warfare as wild or irregular. Then, when conventional tactics repeatedly fail, the settlers begin adopting many of the same principles: travel light, stay mounted, use surprise, read tracks, avoid unnecessary baggage, strike quickly. Do not remain where the enemy expects you to remain. The label changes. The logic does not. The Comanche are shaping American frontier warfare simply by being difficult to defeat. But while tactics and weapons change, another transformation is occurring that matters even more: population. The Comanche can defeat patrols, they can raid settlements, they can drive back expeditions. What they cannot easily do is stop millions of people from existing beyond the eastern horizon. The United States is growing, settlers continue moving west, roads expand, military posts multiply, markets develop, cattle herds move, surveyors arrive, then more families. Then more towns. Every year adds pressure. This is a very different enemy from a single military expedition. An army can retreat. A population does not retreat in the same way. One settlement becomes several, several become a county. A trail becomes a road becomes a commercial route. The Comanche can attack individual pieces of this system, but the system keeps producing replacements. It is like trying to empty a river with a bucket. This does not mean the expansion is peaceful or inevitable. It is neither. It means only that the scale of the struggle is changing. The Comanche warrior is still extraordinarily dangerous in the environment that produced him. But increasingly, his problem is larger than the enemy standing directly in front of him. Behind that enemy are farms, factories, government budgets, ammunition production, railroads approaching from far away, and a population base many times larger than the Comanche population. The plains remain wide, but they are no longer isolated. The industrial world is beginning to reach them. For a while, Comanche mobility continues to frustrate military operations. The same old pattern repeats. Soldiers ride out, Comanche camps move, patrols follow tracks, war parties strike elsewhere. A commander can spend weeks searching for people who seem to disappear into the grass. Winter complicates everything. Summer complicates everything differently. Horses fail. Water becomes scarce. Supplies run low. The plains still defend those who understand them. But the United States can afford to fail and return. That is a terrible strategic advantage. One failed expedition does not end the war. Another can be organized, then another. More soldiers can arrive. More weapons can be manufactured. More forts can be supplied. The Comanche cannot replace losses at the same scale. Every experienced warrior represents years of training. Every good horse represents time and care. Every family lost to warfare or disease weakens a population already far smaller than the society expanding around it. Disease is especially cruel because horsemanship offers no defense against it. Smallpox does not care how well you ride. Cholera cannot be outmaneuvered on the plains. Epidemics have already struck indigenous communities across North America repeatedly. The Comanche suffer as well. A camp can survive a military raid by moving. It cannot simply ride away from an infection already traveling from person to person. People become sick, families lose parents, children die, knowledge disappears with older people. Population decline does what armies struggle to accomplish. It reduces the number of people available to hunt, trade, raise children, care for horses, and defend the community. Yet even this is not the final blow. For that you must look beyond the warrior. Look beyond the ranger. Look beyond the gun. Look toward the horizon there. Dark shapes are moving through the grass. Buffalo, thousands of them. Sometimes more than the eye can comfortably count. They appear almost permanent. Generations have lived with them. The buffalo provides meat. Its hide becomes shelter and clothing. Sinew serves practical purposes. Bone can become tools. The animal is woven deeply into plains life, and because buffalo herds seem so vast, imagining their disappearance is difficult. A Comanche warrior might reasonably fear enemy soldiers, he might fear disease, he might fear losing horses, but the idea that the buffalo themselves could nearly vanish within a generation would sound almost impossible. Yet this is precisely where the next stage of the story is heading. Commercial hunters are coming. New rifles make long-distance killing increasingly efficient. Eastern markets create demand for hides. Railroads make transportation easier. The killing begins to operate at a scale very different from subsistence hunting. A hunter may kill not because his family needs meat, but because a hide has a price. That difference is enormous. Traditional hunting contains natural limits. A community can consume only so much. A commercial market far away can demand far more. Soon carcasses will lie across the plains with valuable hides removed and much of the rest left behind. The Comanche will watch the foundation beneath their world begin to disappear. And no mounted maneuver can stop it. No warrior can hang beneath his horse and shield himself from an economic system. No arrow can force millions of buffalo back into existence. That is the tragedy waiting beyond the age of the revolver. For generations, every enemy has asked essentially the same question. How do we defeat the Comanche warrior? Spain tries forts. Mexico tries military expeditions. Texas develops rangers. The United States sends cavalry. Weapons improve. Tactics improve. Still, the struggle continues. But eventually, the most effective answer will not be found on the battlefield at all. Destroy the conditions that allow the warrior's society to function, and his individual skill begins to matter less. This is a much colder form of warfare. There is no heroic duel, no dramatic charge, just absence, fewer buffalo, fewer horses. Fewer healthy people, less food, less room, a world becoming smaller. Imagine an older Comanche warrior sitting beside a fire in the later 19th century. He remembers the stories told by his father. Perhaps his grandfather remembered a time when Spanish power seemed distant and fragile. He remembers enormous buffalo herds. He remembers riding through country where a Comanche war party could disappear for days without encountering an enemy settlement. Now there are more roads, more soldiers, more hunters, more fences. The firearms are different. The patrols are better adapted. The horizon itself seems less reliable. He can still ride, he can still shoot. He can still read the ground better than most men who have entered his country. But skill cannot reverse every kind of change. That is one of history's quieter cruelties. A society can become exceptionally good at solving one problem and then encounter another problem for which the old solution no longer works. The Comanche mastered mounted life on the plains with astonishing speed. For more than a century, that mastery allowed them to resist powers vastly larger than themselves. Now the world is changing beneath the horse's hooves. The next enemy will not charge across the grass carrying a flag. It will fall one buffalo at a time. And when the herds finally begin disappearing, the greatest horsemen on the plains will discover that there are some enemies even speed cannot outrun. Let us leave the gun smoke behind now and ride toward a quieter battlefield. There are no lines of soldiers waiting here, no flags, no officers shouting orders, only grass, wind, and a silence that is beginning to feel wrong. You notice it first in the distance between the herds. There was a time when buffalo seemed to cover the plains. Old people remember mornings when the horizon itself appeared dark with animals. A herd could stretch farther than a rider could easily see. Thousands of bodies moved together, raising clouds of dust that hung in the dry air. Sometimes the earth seemed to tremble beneath them. For the Comanche, this abundance has never been merely scenery. The buffalo is food, it is clothing, it is shelter, it is material for tools and equipment, it is part of trade. It is woven into daily life so thoroughly that removing it is almost like removing the grass beneath the horses. But now the herds are becoming harder to find. At first, perhaps this does not seem catastrophic. Buffalo move. Every hunter knows this. A herd that was here yesterday may be far away tomorrow. Weather changes their routes, water changes their routes, grass changes their routes. So when hunters return with reports that the animals have shifted, people simply move. That is what they have always done. Then it happens again and again. The hunters travel farther, the herds are smaller. On the horizon, strange wagons appear. White hunters are moving onto the plains in growing numbers. They are not hunting buffalo in the same way a Comanche family hunts buffalo. They are hunting for markets. That distinction will help destroy a world. A Comanche hunter kills because the animal provides necessities. Meat can feed people, hide can become shelter or clothing, sinew can be used, bone can be shaped. A buffalo represents an extraordinary collection of useful materials. Waste makes little sense when so much labor is required to survive. The commercial hunter sees something different. He sees money walking through the grass. Buffalo hides have value in distant markets. Industrial machinery can turn thick hides into useful leather. Railroads and trading networks make it increasingly possible to move those hides east, and so the calculation changes. A hunter no longer needs to ask how much meat his family can consume. He asks how many hides he can sell. The answer can be enormous. Imagine watching from a distant ridge below a herd grazes. The animals are calm. A commercial hunter positions himself where he can shoot without immediately causing the entire herd to flee. A rifle cracks. One buffalo falls. The others shift. Another shot. Another animal falls. Then another. The process continues. There is something terribly impersonal about it. The hunter does not need to chase every animal on horseback. Improved rifles allow killing from distance. The animals may remain confused long enough for many to be shot. Afterward, teams move among the bodies. The valuable hides are removed. Much of the remaining animal may be left where it fell. The smell arrives later. Rotting flesh, dust, flies, bones whitening beneath the sun. For people whose lives depend upon the buffalo, the sight is difficult to comprehend. It is not simply hunting done more efficiently, it is destruction operating according to an entirely different logic, and the scale grows rapidly. More hunters arrive. More hides leave. Railroads make distant markets closer. Settlements expand. The slaughter accelerates. The buffalo have survived wolves, drought, winter storms, indigenous hunting for countless generations. They are not prepared for an industrial economy. Neither are the people who depend on them. Comanche hunters must now travel farther to find food. Farther travel requires stronger horses, more time away from camp, more uncertainty. A poor hunt is no longer simply bad luck. It may be evidence of a permanent change. and hunger changes everything. The famous mounted warrior requires calories. His horse requires grass. His family requires food. Children require food. Older people require food. The warrior cannot live on reputation. He cannot feed a camp with stories of old raids. A bow, however beautifully made, does not produce buffalo where none remain. This is the weakness hidden inside Comanche strength. Their society has adapted brilliantly to the ecology of the plains. That adaptation made them powerful when the plains remained healthy. But dependence works both ways. The more perfectly a society fits one environment, the more devastating it can be when that environment is deliberately or rapidly transformed. The buffalo are not the only thing disappearing. Disease has already been reducing the Comanche population. Epidemics move through camps with a cruelty no cavalry patrol can imitate. Smallpox is especially terrifying. A person becomes feverish. Then more people become ill. The disease spreads through families. Some survive, others do not. A warrior who can dodge arrows cannot dodge infection. A horse cannot carry him fast enough. Traditional knowledge offers comfort and care, but diseases arriving through expanding continental contact can kill at devastating rates. The losses accumulate over generations. There are fewer children growing into adults, fewer hunters, fewer experienced elders, fewer warriors. Families that once seemed large become smaller, and every death carries knowledge away with it. A man who knows distant water sources dies. A woman skilled in processing hides dies. An elder who remembers agreements and family histories dies. Population is not merely a number, it is memory distributed among living people. Now add warfare. The United States military has learned from decades of failure. Its commanders increasingly understand that simply chasing Comanche warriors across the plains is exhausting and unreliable, so the strategy changes. Instead of waiting for war parties to attack and then pursuing them, military forces begin seeking camps and resources. Winter campaigns become useful because cold weather reduces mobility, horse herds become targets, food supplies become targets. The objective is increasingly clear: make independent life on the plains impossible. This is not the kind of warfare celebrated in paintings. There may be no dramatic duel between famous warriors. Instead, soldiers destroy lodges, they burn supplies. They capture horses. They force families to move in terrible weather. The pressure is directed at the entire system supporting resistance. And eventually that pressure concentrates in the Red River War. By the middle of the 1870s, military operations spread across the southern plains. Comanche, Kiowa, Southern Cheyenne, and allied groups face coordinated pressure. Columns move through the region, camps are attacked, supplies become increasingly difficult to replace. The buffalo herds are collapsing at the same time. The old escape strategy still works tactically. A camp can move, but where does it move now? That question would have been easier generations earlier. Ride toward another buffalo herd. Move toward better grass. Relocate beyond the reach of soldiers. Now each answer is becoming less certain. Soldiers are coming from multiple directions. Hunters are killing buffalo across enormous areas. Settlements are spreading. And the population itself has been weakened by disease. The open plains are still vast, but vastness no longer guarantees refuge. Then comes Palo Duro Canyon. The canyon cuts dramatically into the Texas Panhandle, hidden below the surrounding plains. Its walls provide shelter. Water and vegetation make it valuable. Comanche and other families use the canyon country as a refuge. From above, much of the landscape looks almost flat. Then the earth suddenly opens. Down below are camps, families, possessions, and, most importantly, horses. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie and cavalry forces locate the camps during the Red River Campaign. The attack surprises the people below. Many escape with their lives into the rough canyon country. That might once have been enough. A camp can be rebuilt, possessions can be replaced, the people can move, but Mackenzie understands the real target. The horses, American forces, capture an enormous herd. For the Comanche, losing horses is not comparable to losing ordinary livestock. The horse is transportation, military power, hunting ability, trade wealth, escape. Without horses, the plains become enormous again. Distances that once required hours now demand exhausting travel. A mounted enemy becomes much harder to evade. Buffalo, where they can still be found, become harder to hunt effectively. War parties lose mobility. Families lose the ability to relocate quickly. The horse is the machine at the center of Comanche life. And now the captured herd is deliberately destroyed. Imagine hearing the gunfire. Not the sharp confusion of battle, something slower, more methodical. Horse after horse is killed. Animals that may have been trained for years collapse. War horses, hunting horses, pack animals. Wealth accumulated across families. The killing continues. For people who have built generations of knowledge around these animals, the loss is almost impossible to measure. A warrior can replace an arrow, he can repair equipment, he may capture another horse during a raid, but replacing a huge herd while starving, pursued by soldiers, and surrounded by shrinking buffalo populations is another matter entirely. The old cycle of Comanche power is reversing. Once, horses created mobility. Mobility created successful hunting and raiding. Successful raids produced more horses. More horses produced greater mobility. Now fewer horses mean less mobility. Less mobility makes hunting and raiding harder. Failed hunting means hunger. Hunger weakens people. Weak people have greater difficulty acquiring horses. The circle turns backward, and for the first time, the Comanche face an enemy they cannot simply ride around. Scarcity. You cannot ambush scarcity. You cannot negotiate with an empty grassland. You cannot frighten hunger. The great irony is that Comanche military skill remains. A warrior who has ridden since childhood has not suddenly forgotten how to control his horse. He has not forgotten how to shoot. He has not forgotten the hidden trails, river crossings, or distant water sources. The knowledge is still there. The world that made that knowledge overwhelmingly powerful is disappearing. Picture yourself riding after the Red River campaigns. Your horse is thin. You have been searching for buffalo. The wind blows dry grass against the animal's legs. Then you reach a place where commercial hunters passed earlier. Bones lie scattered across the ground. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, skulls stare upward with empty sockets. The herd that once fed families has become a field of white remains. There is no enemy soldier to attack, no war party to organize against those bones, only silence. This is the moment when the story of Comanche resistance becomes something sadder. For generations, outsiders had tried to defeat the warrior. They discovered that the easier target was the world beneath him. Take away the buffalo. Take away the horses. Reduce the population through disease and war. Restrict movement. Eventually, even the finest horsemen on the plains must stop. Not because another rider proved better. Not because his courage disappeared. But because courage cannot be eaten. Skill cannot replace an ecosystem. And a warrior cannot remain mounted when there are no horses left beneath him. Somewhere on those shrinking plains, however, one important leader is still refusing to come in. His name is Quanah, the son of two worlds, the child of a Comanche father and a woman born among Texans who came to regard the Comanche as her own people. Quanah will become associated with the final chapter of Free Comanche resistance. But the most remarkable part of his life will not be the moment when he finally stops fighting. It will be what he chooses to do afterward, because the age of the free-ranging Comanche warrior is approaching its end. The Comanche people are not. Let us ride one final time across the southern plains, following a trail that is growing quieter with every passing season. The buffalo are almost gone, the great horse herds have been broken. Military columns move through country that once swallowed armies without leaving much more than hoofprints behind. And somewhere in this shrinking world rides Quanah Parker. His story begins before he is born. It begins with a child named Cynthia Ann Parker. She is born into a family of Anglo-American settlers moving into Texas during the early 19th century. Her family helps establish a settlement known as Fort Parker, a collection of cabins and defensive structures on the Texas frontier. To the settlers, the fort represents safety. To the people already living and traveling through the region, it represents something else. Another settlement, another claim, another piece of land changing hands. When Cynthia Ann is still a young girl, a large raiding party attacks Fort Parker. People are killed. Others are captured. Cynthia Ann is among the captives taken away. For her surviving relatives, this is a tragedy. They imagine a frightened child carried into a strange and dangerous world. And at first, she almost certainly is frightened. She has lost her home. She has been separated from much of her family. She is taken into a society whose language and customs are unfamiliar to her. But then something happens that later generations of Texans find difficult to understand. Cynthia Ann adapts. Years pass. She learns the language. She learns Comanche life. She becomes part of a Comanche family. Eventually, the frightened, captive child no longer understands herself primarily as a captive. She becomes Comanche. She marries a Comanche man, Peter Nocona. They have children. One of those children is Quanah. So Quanah grows up inside the world we have been traveling through all night. He knows horses, he knows buffalo, he knows the plains, he learns the expectations placed upon young Comanche men. And through his mother, he also carries a connection to the expanding Anglo-American society beyond Comancheria. But that connection does not make him less Comanche. The world that shapes his childhood is the world of his father and his people. Then violence enters the family again. Texas forces attack a Comanche camp. Cynthia Ann is taken. The Texans believe they are rescuing a white woman who was stolen as a child. Cynthia Ann does not experience it that way. By this point, the Comanche are her family, her children are there, her life is there. The people returning her to Anglo society see themselves as restoring her to the world where she belongs. She wants to return to the world they have taken her from. This is one of those moments when history refuses to fit comfortably into simple categories. Who is the captive? Who is doing the rescuing? What does home mean after decades have passed? Cynthia Ann is brought back among her biological relatives. Photographs taken during this period show a woman caught between the expectations of people around her and the life she has lost. She never successfully returns to the Comanche. Separation and grief define much of her remaining life. Quanah, meanwhile, remains on the plains. He grows into a warrior during one of the most dangerous periods in Comanche history. The old world is collapsing around him. This makes his resistance different from that of warriors generations earlier. His ancestors fought while Comanche power was expanding. Quanah fights while it is contracting. Every year makes the struggle harder. Buffalo hunters continue their work. Soldiers continue campaigning. Reservation pressure increases. Other Comanche groups begin surrendering. Food becomes scarce. Horse herds become harder to maintain. Still, Quanah and his followers remain outside. There is something almost haunting about imagining those final seasons. The physical skills remain. Men can still ride. They can still disappear into difficult country. They can still fight. But every journey reveals evidence that the strategic situation has changed. A place that once held buffalo is empty. A familiar route now leads towards settlement. A hunting ground contains commercial hunters. A water source may be watched by soldiers. Another group of relatives has gone to the reservation. The map is closing. Eventually, the question is no longer whether Quanah's band can win another fight. They probably can. The question is what winning that fight would accomplish. Kill several soldiers, more soldiers come, capture horses. Finding enough food remains difficult. Escape one military column. Another appears later. A tactical victory cannot restore the buffalo. That realization may be one of the hardest any warrior can face. There is bravery in charging an enemy. There can also be bravery in recognizing when charging will only kill the people who depend upon you. By the middle of the 1870s, Quanah's position has become desperate. His people are hungry. The buffalo economy that supported independent plains life has collapsed. Military pressure continues. The great age of Comancheria is ending, and so Quanah makes the decision that generations of Comanche warriors had resisted. He comes in. He leads his people toward Fort Sill in what will later become Oklahoma. Imagine the final approach. There is no triumphant cavalry charge, no great last battle beneath a burning sunset. Only tired people, thin horses, children, possessions, warriors who understand what this journey means. Behind them lies a world their grandparents could cross almost without limit. Ahead lies confinement to a much smaller territory and dependence upon a government their people have fought for generations. Quanah does not surrender because he suddenly believes the United States is right. He surrenders because his people must survive. That difference defines the next part of his life. Many warriors in history become famous because they die dramatically. Quanah does something harder to turn into legend. He lives, and then he adapts. The same quality that once made Comanche society so formidable now appears in a different form. Remember how this entire journey began. A relatively obscure mountain people encounters the horse. They do not merely adopt it. They reorganize their world around it. They become exceptionally good at using the opportunities the new animal provides. Quanah faces another transformed world. And once again, adaptation becomes survival. He learns to negotiate with American officials. He becomes involved in ranching. He works with cattlemen. He travels. He speaks for Comanche interests in a political environment very different from the one in which he grew up. The warrior becomes a negotiator. This does not mean he simply abandons his identity, quite the opposite. Quanah becomes famous, partly because he refuses the idea that adapting requires pretending not to be Comanche. He can enter American political spaces and still represent his people. He can speak with powerful white officials without accepting that their culture has erased his own. Eventually, he meets Theodore Roosevelt. Think about the strange distance contained inside that meeting. Quanah was born into a world where Comanche warriors still traveled freely across enormous stretches of the southern plains. Now he is meeting the President of the United States. The son of Peter Nocona and Cynthia Ann Parker sits across from one of the most powerful political figures in an industrial nation. Railroads cross the country. Telegraph wires connect cities. Modern armies possess weapons Quanah's grandparents could scarcely have imagined, and yet Quanah is still there. The Comanche are still there. That is important because stories of indigenous warfare are often told as though they end when resistance ends. The warrior rides into the reservation. The screen fades. History moves on. But people do not disappear simply because one chapter of their political power closes. Families continue. Children grow up. Languages survive or struggle to survive. Ceremonies continue. Memories are carried forward. New forms of leadership emerge. The Comanche story does not end when free-ranging military resistance ends. It changes. And perhaps that brings us back to the title of our journey. Why did Comanche warriors appear so extraordinary to the people who fought them? Not because they belonged to some different category of human being, not because they possessed magical strength, and not because every Comanche warrior was an unbeatable fighter. The answer is more interesting than that. Their society developed a remarkably complete relationship with the horse. Children learned riding early. Young people practiced archery and physical skills. Hunters learned to function around dangerous moving animals. Riders learned to control horses while keeping their hands free. War parties understood distance, terrain, water, surprise, and the management of mounts. The entire system fit the southern plains. That is what frightened outsiders. A Spanish soldier might spend years learning to become a soldier. The Comanche warrior's relevant education had begun during childhood. A cavalryman learned to ride as part of military training. The Comanche child often learned riding as part of life. A commander looked at the plains and saw empty space separating important places. The Comanche looked at the same plains and saw the important place itself. That difference shaped everything. Spain learned it, Mexico learned it, Texas learned it. The United States learned it. Each power arrived with greater numbers, permanent settlements, firearms, and confidence. Each discovered that technological superiority did not automatically produce control. Eventually, the United States prevailed. But even then, victory required far more than simply defeating Comanche warriors in ordinary battle. Disease weakened the population. Commercial buffalo slaughter devastated the economic and ecological foundation of plains life. Military campaigns targeted camps and horse herds. Settlement reduced space. Repeating firearms narrowed tactical advantages. All of these pressures worked together. The Comanche warrior was not defeated by one superior warrior. The world around him was dismantled. And now, as our journey reaches its end, imagine the plains becoming quiet again. The old war parties are gone. No settlement watches the full moon with quite the same fear. Buffalo bones lie bleaching beneath the sun, though generations later buffalo themselves will return in protected herds. Railroads cross lands where riders once followed trails known only through memory. Towns appear, roads spread, maps become crowded with names. But stand somewhere far from the cities on a clear night, and some of the old landscape remains. The wind still moves through grass, the moon still rises, distance still becomes strange after dark. And it is possible for a moment to understand why generations of soldiers found this country so unsettling. You cannot see very far at night, but a horse can cover a great deal of ground before morning. Perhaps somewhere in your own family tree there were people who knew a world like this. Not necessarily Comanche, perhaps farmers, sailors, hunters, soldiers, people whose names have disappeared, while some tiny part of their lives continues through you. History is full of them. Most never appear in books. They wake, they work, they worry, they raise children. They survive whatever century happens to surround them. The famous warrior is not so different. Strip away the legend and there's a person beneath it. A child learning to ride. A teenager trying not to embarrass himself in front of older men. A father worrying whether food will last through winter. An aging warrior noticing that the world of his youth is disappearing. And perhaps that is the quietest lesson left by the Comanche. For generations, outsiders remembered them for refusing to change, but that is almost exactly backward. Their great rise began because they changed faster than nearly anyone around them. They encountered the horse and rebuilt their way of life around it. Then, when the plains world collapsed, people such as Quanah Parker adapted again. The form changed, the people remained. So tonight, when you picture the Comanche warrior hanging low beside a galloping horse, bow in hand, try to see beyond the impossible-looking feat. See the childhood behind it, the countless ordinary mornings, the practice, the falls, the buffalo hunts, the patient training of horses, the knowledge passed from one generation to another. What looked like a freak of nature was something more human and, in its own way, more impressive. It was the result of culture, environment, repetition, adaptation, and time. A lifetime compressed into a few seconds on horseback. And somewhere on the southern plains, beneath a pale full moon, the last echoes of those horses disappear into the grass. The riders are gone from sight, but the Comanche are not. They are still here. And perhaps that is where we should leave them. Not frozen inside the final battle, not disappearing into an old photograph, but continuing forward, carrying memory with them, while the moon that once frightened an entire frontier rises quietly overhead.